Welcome to Down in SA, aka Down in San Antonio, Texas, that is. Here you will be a part of the lives of the cool kids who grew up here in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. From the music, culture, society, Big Red, hippo sodas, and breakfast tacos, you will learn the cool elements of our hidden society. So grab a long neck or a shot of tequila, light up a doobie, and say, screw the Alamo. This is who we really are, the cool kids down in SA. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Down in SA. My name is Chick. I'm with sportscaster of the last century, Pete Delgado. I worked with him at KMOL Channel 4 TV, located on North St. Mary's, down on the river. And today we're going to be storytelling because I know our theme of Down in SA is about the cool kids, which Pete meets that criterion of the 60s, 70s, and 80s. But everybody that Pete interacted with, the community, sports fans, coaches, teams, all of those people were already embedded as part of Down in SA. So he's going to share with us what some of those experiences were like, and you'll get a real good sense of what it was like being a sportscaster in the community of San Antonio. Welcome to the show, Pete.
Well, thanks, Chick. Pretty excited about all this.
So let's get into what was the market that you were at as a sportscaster before you arrived to San Antonio, and how did you find out about the head sportscasting position?
Well, I was a weekend guy in Tucson, Arizona. That market was in the high 70s. I had an agent. He called me and said, hey, I got you an interview in San Antonio, Texas. I had been in Texas, even though some people might not claim El Paso, but I was in El Paso in 1985 for a couple of days, but that's the only time I had been in Texas. So they flew me down, went through an interview, and, they pretty much hired me on the spot. So started in June of 1992.
So you arrive here in 1992. You walk into the door of KMOL, and if I'm not mistaken, I think Emery Loper was the woman that worked at the front desk there, the secretary, right?
Right. Yeah.
And she was quite a card because she had her cigarettes. She walked with a brace leg. She was an ornery woman, and she'd sit you down, kind of put you in your spot, and would clear you to go back for whoever you were going to meet. So you see her, and you get pulled in. And at that time, it was Ron Herrig was the news director of the station?
Right. And, he was a Yankee. He wasn't a Texas guy. But, again, I'm in Texas for the first time. And one of the things he said to me that it's still bouncing around in my head today. He said, Texas is one big high school, he said. It's like everybody's real rah-rah. And that's one of the things I really liked about Texas when I got here. Other places you live, people maybe complain about this, complain about that. We don't like this. But, Texas is rah-rah. We're the best. We're the biggest. We got the best this. We got the biggest that. Like a bunch of cheerleaders out of high school. And, it still rings true pretty much.
Right. So give me a rundown. So Ron Herrig, you guys are there for a couple of hours. I guess he shows you around the station. Does he walk you into the sports department and just kind of introduces you to who's there and who's working?
From what I remember, I may have only met Don Harris. And back then, Don, who's now, not only the longest running sportscaster, he's one of the longest running news personalities in town, maybe the longest tenured, with some people recently leaving at other stations. So I think I just briefly met Don, maybe Chuck Licata, Rich Glabman. They were both kind of producer types, but I don't really remember too much about all that. I think, I was a little overwhelmed. I remember I came in that night and watched a newscast inside the control booth, watched the 10. They said, hey, well, you're done for the day. Let's, sign some papers tomorrow. I went back to my room. They put me up at the St. Anthony.
All right.
And I was looking out the window, and it was a rainy night, and I saw a statue in the middle of this park that was across from the hotel. And I went like, what was that? And I go walking out there, and it was kind of misty and raining, and it was Travis from the Alamo. And I didn't know too much of the story about then, but I saw on the pedestal it said, "Lest we forget our Confederate dead." And I thought to myself, Where am I? Where am I? Where's Texas? I got to kind of pull out the atlas, Wait a second, how far south are we?
Right.
But, anyway, that was that. I was very, very excited to have the job. I had some obligations, a couple of weeks I had to close out. I believe we were in ratings still. This was probably the month period. I had to close out in Arizona. And after that was done, I loaded stuff up in my truck and drove to San Antonio.
Yeah. So just so our audience knows too, Pete grew up in Los Angeles. So as a kid, he grew up around a lot of what we grew up in San Antonio. Really good concerts, a lot of good shows, talking about beach, talking about California cool. So he synthesized very easily into the San Antonio community. So I just kind of want to drop that in as a background, a little bit of Pete. So you get San Antonio. Who are the teams that are playing that makes KMOL sports? Like, obviously the Spurs were playing. What other teams, whether they were professional, semi, what was driving the San Antonio community to go see sports?
Well, obviously the Cowboys, were big. The Cowboys at that point were just coming off some rough times. But my first year there, they made the Super Bowl with the youngest, roster in the league. They won the Super Bowl in Pasadena. I went to that game. They blew out the Bills big time. I think that was the third straight loss in the Super Bowl for the Buffalo Bills. But I just felt, just how people just really, loved the Cowboys, even though, we weren't Dallas, right? Houston was closer. The Oilers at that time, they didn't have the love like the Cowboys did. Locally, of course, the missions were there. And I was aware of things that had gone on with that organization because I grew up in Los Angeles as a Los Angeles Dodger fan. And for a while, the missions were the San Antonio Dodgers. They were the AA affiliate. And so, I would hear about, some guy being brought up from the minor leagues, he'd joined the roster and, he just came up from the San Antonio Dodgers. He just came up from the San Antonio Missions. So, I was very well aware of that franchise as well.
So there's the Spurs, there is the San Antonio Missions / San Antonio Dodgers. What about, was there semi-pro ball? Well, were the, let me step back. Were the Iguanas, was the ice hockey team there at the time that you were a sportscaster?
No, not quite yet. But what was there? San Antonio has a colorful history of minor league or lower league football. And San Antonio had an arena league football team at that time, the Force. And I actually went just as a spectator one night to watch the San Antonio Force. I don't think anybody from that team did anything, bigger and better than that, but we did have an arena league team. Later on, we did get the Iguanas that you mentioned, and that was in the Central Hockey League, which would essentially be like single A baseball, so to speak. Mm-hmm. The players were small, they were NHL guys or well over 6 feet, big, strong, burly guys. Well, there's a bunch of 5'5", 5'7" guys. The excitement about it is they'd fight at a drop of a hat, and so that was very entertaining with the fans. And one of the things that San Antonio fans really liked about the Iguanas, again, these guys were probably making $30 a game or something, and so fans after the game would approach the players and go, "Hey, you want to go out and have drinks with us?" "Sure," the player would say. And he'd go, "You want to come to my house tomorrow for dinner?" Yes, I would, ma'am. So, these professional hockey players really got involved with the fans. And I mean, it was economically beneficial for them too, because you know what, they probably were getting a nicer dinner than the team meal, and the fans had a real big bonding. So, when the Iguanas eventually went away and the Dragons came, which was a higher level, essentially like triple A of hockey, and the Dragons went away, people were so sad, and they were very resentful of the Dragons. Now, the Dragons were much higher quality hockey. Again, these guys are on the verge of the NHL. But, the fans really missed the hominess, the friendliness, the accessibility to, these young hockey players that would come to their house and maybe babysit their kids.
Yeah. Well, see, that's the thing about the San Antonio fans and the community overall, because this is what I experienced with the San Antonio Spurs. It's Kobe Dietrich at that time, the Whopper, James Silas, George Spider Gervin. I think that was Iceman Gervin. Excuse me, George. Yeah. Iceman Gervin, right? And there was, they were highly approachable. I can't tell you how many times I would go down to a club called the Lower Berth, which was in St. Paul Square. There was actually take your steps down into a lower, I don't know, it was an old storage room or what have you, and it was like literally next to the railroad tracks between there and the main area where all those buildings are that you drive through St. Paul Square, and it was the Lower Berth, and we would go down there and hang out with any number of them on any post-game night, just chilling out. There wasn't even people that were like, can I have your autograph? There wasn't even a selfie moment at that time. I forgot what the magazine was. It was kind of a loosely printed magazine, maybe like Bill Dante remembers, but every once in a while, a photographer would sneak down there and fire off some shots, and, it would make it somewhere. But, I think Bob Hill was one of the coaches at that time. And there was no like, hey guys, I don't want you hanging around with the fans. Everybody was always accessible. I mean, that's one of the things that I've loved about growing up in San Antonio. Even when we went to go see concerts and we see different, rockers hanging around the city and just chilling out with them or going out to dinner with them or hanging out at the Esquire bar, everybody was free to interact with one another. And that's one of the best things I can say about the San Antonio community. So let's talk about...
and I've always felt that too.
Right.
I remember like a perfect example of it there was one time I was walking into Academy there on the northwest side, far northwest side. The Academy was on Military, I believe. And I was walking in, and David Robinson and his family were walking out. And, people that were going the other way were just kind of, hey, David. And he's like, hi. Nobody was swamping him to get, rip off his clothes or get his autograph. It was just kind of like, he was your neighbor. He just walked by and it was just like, hey, David, hey, how you doing? It's like that. And, that just kind of embodies stuff. Here's something I'm going to add real quick. David Robinson, who now may be overshadowed, as far as Spurs history goes by, what Tim Duncan did, and now Wembanyama is here now. But, David was really one of the most wonderful people I think ever put on this earth. Early 90s, the television station had a promotion. It was called Beat the Pro. And they got local celebrities to go take shots at a golf hole. And then some weeks later, at that same hole, local folks could, contribute $5 or something and see if they could beat the shot that the pro made on a par 3 hole. Well, I can't remember the golf course. It might have been the Dominion. We're waiting for David. And David was supposed to be there like at 9 in the morning. Now, the Spurs, the previous day was Easter Sunday. And the Spurs had played a double overtime game in Denver at high altitude, right? And I'm thinking like, boy, David's going to be worn out, right? So it's a few minutes to 9, and the producer is saying, where's David? Where's David? And I go, well, I don't know. I go, you know what? I know his wife is pregnant. She's due at any time. Well, here comes David in the Range Rover, roaring up, pulls and parks. And I go, hey, David, he goes, oh, I'm sorry I'm late. Valerie had the baby last night.
Oh, wow.
And I'm going like, what? Well, you certainly could have canceled. And he said, no, I gave a commitment. I'm here. Let's do it. And I was like, wow, what a guy. I mean, how many people, 99% of the people on earth would have blown that off. But David, being an officer and a gentleman, stuck to his commitment, did the little promotion with us. And for the rest, forever, I'm going, this guy is certainly special.
Right. Wow. That's a great story. Double overtime, high altitude. Wife dumps a baby after midnight and comes out and plays golf in the morning. Or
yeah. I mean, it was like, I remember he looked all tired. He was all tired looking, and I thought just from the basketball of it. No, he was up all night, with the new baby coming, so.
Right.
Incredible.
So let's get to, so you get the job, and I remember when I started there, it was Sharon Jones, George McKenzie, what's his name? Riscone, Art Riscone, Dan Locke, Dan Garcia. I'm talking about the headliners, right? And so I started working there in production, and there I am in studio. Brian Dawson's is the TD, and we're working with Forrest Cars, the assistant news director. Pete Mills is there, and Rusty Ferguson, Danny Richardson. We're all the technical and the studio crew. And then all of a sudden, I start seeing, this departure. They were all getting picked up by the Houston market. Dan Locke went over there. Dan Garcia went over there. I don't know if Sharon Jones went over there. George McKenzie.
Yeah, before my time.
George McKenzie bought into the Subway franchise, so he was, putting down, Subway sandwiches. And at the beginning, you kind of thought like, wow, this guy's making some good change, but now he's got a Subway franchise. Like, what's that all about? I went over there, and there he is with an apron making me a sandwich. And, of course, lo and behold, no telling how many franchises he got and how many millions he made, but he got in at the good time. So they're all making an exodus. And so you're arriving, and by that time, Deborah Daniels is sitting in the chair, which was, I think she came over from KSAT,
right.
Had a memory like nobody's business. She could remember every political candidate, their exact name, she was brilliant at memory, as well as delivering the news. And she was, at that time, the first female anchor, I believe, in the state, if not the country, in the local market, that signed $1 million contract. And that was huge. That was huge.
Right.
And they eventually paired her up with Jerry Grant. He came in from San Francisco, and his road to glory was when they had the big quake in San Francisco. He was the only one on the ground with breaking news that all the national agencies were picking him up because Jerry was right in the thick of it. I mean, it looked like a movie behind him. And so they were paired up. You come in, and John Willing was there. He was the weather guy. He was always excited. If they ran short on time, he might get 3 minutes, and he would be, oh, goody, goody. I mean, like he was just the proverbial, weather weasel. And at the end of the day, I'm surprised that he never went to the Weather Channel, but he went back to Utah, I believe. And so you arrive, and when McKenzie left, who else was there as a sportscaster? Like, they didn't move anybody in the sports department to fill his chair because they put out a nationwide search, right? So when you arrived there, who thought that they might have been the successor to George McKenzie?
Well, nobody at that point. It was something, I saw it in a Jeannie Jekyll article that somebody sent me, that I was the product of a nationwide search. Well, Randy Sparagi was the number 2 guy, weekend guy. And, he felt he was the heir apparent. Well, they hired me. That made him upset, and he quit in protest. The only one left was Don Harris, who was just doing the morning show. And I believe might have just recorded it. Was not even live on the set. It was something like that.
Yeah, I remember they used to do that, right?
Yeah. So Randy quit. That left Don because I couldn't get there. I had to complete my obligation at the other station. So for, I don't know, 3 weeks or so, Don had to do every single show. He worked, 3 weeks straight, had to do that. I mean, he got a baptism by fire for sure. But, he held down the fort. And, there was some animosity that I was hired. And I felt very uncomfortable. A guy you worked with, Keith Hartsfield, who was also in production, came to me. He goes, you better make sure that anchor woman likes you, because if she doesn't like you, you're not going to last long. Things like that were being said to me. And, ironically, Deborah and I got very, very close. We were, I'd be putting makeup on next to her, and her and I were very, very close. But, it was just, there was like an uneasiness because, a lot of those folks were, kind of Texas people, right. San Antonio people, had some connections there. And, I was this West Coast guy that came in that, may not have been everybody's popular choice to have the job. So it was a little awkward at first, but, things worked out great. I had a great 8 years.
But, that was one of those, like you said, and I didn't realize that Ron Herrick was a Yankee, right? But his chemistry for putting a cocktail of producers and reporters together was pretty damn good, because you had Gabe Caggiano, Brian Karam, Brian Karam is like one of the most astute, reporters up in D.C. I mean, he has made himself a huge following, and I can't remember which magazine he writes for, what publication, but anyways, so there was Brian Karam, Gabe Caggiano, right? You had a person like Dan Locke. You had Mayreen, who was like a producer. It's like you had this real mix of people that
Randy Iles.
Yeah, Randy Iles. I mean, these people were not Texans, so to say. I mean, they were all from different Carr, he wasn't from there either, right? I mean, all these people.
It was
Chuck Licata.
That was one of the things that I was so impressed with when I got there, was just the level of talent at the reporter level. Everybody was solid. They were in their 30s, right? You look at the program, the reporters in San Antonio these days, they're in their 20s. These were veteran people that were, Joan Lucas, had worked at 2 or 3 smaller markets, toiled there, learned, got, sharpened by steel, and learned their way. It was a very impressive reporter pool at KMOL in the early 90s.
And what was even more impressive, and this was, I can't say that I was ever in the newsroom at Ken's or over at KSAT or even PBS for that matter. But in our newsroom, you could smoke cigarettes.
Yeah.
And when you got a little fed up, everybody would go to the back parking lot, which literally KMOL looks over the San Antonio River and over the Havana Hotel. We'd all be out there like birds on a wire smoking cigarettes. Sometimes we'd be there during our lunch break throwing our fishing line, trying to catch fish from the San Antonio River just for the hell of it. And, that was just real common. You couldn't smoke in the studio, but you could run around and smoke anywhere else unless you were doing some editing in an editing room, And you know what? Now that I think about it,
there might have been some.
Yeah, I think I remember seeing a couple of editors that had their little ashtrays in there.
Yeah, the ones they'd have the one with the little vacuum fan sucking in there. I don't know what that was doing. But yeah, no, it was a different place. I know, back in those days too, I worked at other stations. They'd place the reporters that smoked all in a little corner. So they could just all, they're still in the newsroom, kind of like back in the day when you could smoke on the plane. You were still inside the plane, but they put all the smokers in the back. Somehow that was supposed to be better.
Right.
But, the reporters would be in the corner, and they'd all be smoking away, cigarettes dangling off their lips while they're banging on the typewriter.
Oh, yeah. So, look, this is what we're going to do. So everybody out there in SA land and well beyond the borders of the great state of Tejas, we're going to stop here, and we're going to continue with part 2 with Pete Delgado right after this.